What we're going to be doing today is dealing with the actual solar cells themselves. We're going to be soldering the tabbing wires onto the PV cells, and we're going to show you just exactly how to do that. Several things before we start. Wear gloves, the surgical type of latex or whatever gloves. We don't want to get our skin oils onto the surface of the PV cell itself. The second thing to keep in mind is that these cells are very delicate. Okay, they're very brittle and easy to break. It's just that simple to break these. So we need to be pretty careful when we're manipulating these cells and moving them around and flipping them over and soldering on them. Third thing is to give yourself a clean surface. Paper is the best. Newspaper works fine. I just happen to have some of this this paper here, which we taped down to the table. The ingredients that we need to have today to put this whole thing together are as follows. We've got the silver solder, and we'll be showing you what we're going to do with that in just a second. We've got the actual tabbing wire itself, which is a thin, flat, pre-soldered wire. We have the actual soldering iron itself, and we're using this pen type because it's the easiest to manipulate. And finally, the liquid flux that is required in order to make the solder adhere to whichever surface we're soldering to. Okay? The first step is to cut the tab wire to the appropriate length. Now, we're using solar cells that are 3 inches wide. And so when we tab two of them together, we'll need a tab wire that's twice that long, about 6 inches. So what we're going to do is go ahead and cut several tab wires at 5.5 inches, just a little bit short of that 6 inches. To make that easier, now you're going to be cutting a lot of wire, and you're going to be tabbing and soldering quite a few cells. So you want to get a system down so it goes quickly and fairly, with as little effort as possible. So what I did is I just took a piece of that 1x2 that we used to make the panels, drilled a hole and stuck a pen barrel in it, and that tends to hold it a little bit for us. We just throw that on there. Made a mark at 5.5 inches, and it makes it fairly quick to go ahead and cut the wire. You grab the wire like this, cut it. Well, let's see if we can do this a little better. Cut the wire. Cut it. And so that makes that go fairly quickly. So the next step in tabbing the wire is to do the back side. The back side of these is the positive side, and we'll be reiterating that several times because it's very important to know which is the positive and which is the negative side. The negative side is the dark blue side facing the sun. The back side is positive. So the first thing that we're going to do in this procedure is to go ahead and wipe the liquid flux onto each one of these contact points, without which you will not be able to solder. It's totally essential. Okay? The next step is to put on your glasses so you can see what you're doing. Now, in order to solder the tabs onto here, we must first what's called tin them. That is, put a small dab of solder onto each tab. And I like to do that in this direction. And you see why we need to have a nice surface where we can manipulate these cells around with no danger of scratching that fairly delicate surface. So we're just going to take and put a little dab of solder on each one of these tabs, just like that. At a time, it just makes things go a little bit quicker. And then we'll turn the cell in this direction. Take one of our little tabs, lay it onto the and it's just a matter of melting it on with the soldering iron. Just like that. And that's really all there is to it as far as tabbing, putting the tab wire on the back side of the cells. You can't, counterintuitively, if it doesn't stick right away, you don't want to continue to hold the iron onto the tab. It works just the opposite. You put the iron on very briefly, melt the solder, and then remove the iron quickly because that's the only way that it will adhere. The solder will set up in about a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a second one. 2 cells tab. Okay, now that we've shown you how to tab the back of the cells, the next step is to go ahead and show you how to tab the front of the cells. And once again, the first step is to run the flux, just a very light touch on there, otherwise it tends to flood the surface of the cell. Just like that. We take our tabbing wire, lay it on the white stripe. Actually, I'm going to turn this around. Take the soldering iron and lay it on like that. And do the second one. And that's just how easy it is to tab the front of the cells.